Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into something, well, it's pretty wild. It's a radical and, frankly, risky idea to cool our planet. What if we could build a giant artificial sunshade for the entire Earth? This is the incredibly controversial world of solar geoengineering. So let's kick things off with a strange paradox. The cleaner we make our air, the faster our planet might actually be heating up. Now, for years, as we've passed laws to clean up smoke from factories and fuel from ships, we've been patting ourselves on the back for cleaner air. But it turns out there was a hidden and kind of disturbing side effect to all that gunk we were putting up there. That's right. For decades, that smoggy haze of pollution was acting like an accidental, planet-wide sun shield. It was literally bouncing sunlight back into space, and it was hiding about a third of the actual warming from all the CO2 we've been pumping out. Now that we're cleaning up that pollution, that accidental protection is disappearing, and we're starting to feel the full unfiltered heat. So this has led scientists to a really thorny question. If we've lost that accidental cooling effect, should we maybe think about creating a deliberate, cleaner version? And this is where this radical idea called solar radiation management, or SRM, comes into the conversation. Okay, let's break this down. The version of SRM that gets the most attention involves a fleet of planes flying way, way up into the stratosphere, much higher than commercial jets, and spraying a fine mist of tiny reflective particles. The whole point is to copy what happens after a huge volcanic eruption, right? When a volcano blows, it shoots tons of ash and sulfur high into the atmosphere, and that cools the planet for a year or two. The idea here is to create a similar, but more controlled sun-dimming effect. Okay, but hold on. Deliberately spraying stuff into our atmosphere on a global scale, that should set off some major alarm bells, right? Let's forget about the climate impacts for just a second and ask a really basic question. What are the direct risks to our health when all those particles eventually fall back down to Earth? When you think about the health risks, you really got to look at two different groups of people. First, you've got the workers, the people actually making, shipping, and spraying these aerosols. They would face short, high-dose exposures, but they could at least wear protective gear. And then you've got everyone else, the public. That means all of us, breathing this in at low doses, but continuously, for years, maybe even decades, with absolutely no practical way to protect ourselves. In this slide, wow. This is where it gets really sobering. This shows the potential health effects of just one of the proposed materials, sulfuric acid. And the list is just staggering. We're talking about everything from irritating your lungs to potential heart problems to a documented increased risk of cancer in the larynx. And yes, at very high exposures, it can kill you. And remember, this is just one of the chemicals they're thinking about using. And here's the absolute kicker. Not only are the potential health risks really bad, but for a lot of these materials, we don't even have an internationally agreed upon standard for what a safe level of public exposure would even be. We would be going into this completely in the dark. So with all these scary health risks, you'd think pretty much everyone would be saying no way, right? Well, some huge global surveys were recently done on this, and the results, they are really not what you might expect. First, and this is a really big deal, the vast majority of people on this planet have never even heard of this technology. Somewhere between 75 and 80% of people surveyed know little to nothing about it. Basically, this entire conversation has been happening almost entirely behind closed doors, among scientists and policymakers. And this chart just shows you so clearly that when you do explain it to people, support for this kind of geoengineering is way, way lower and much more controversial than other climate solutions. I mean, look at that. Only 20% of people are all in on this idea, but 62% fully support planting trees. That's a huge difference. But here's the twist. While support isn't exactly high, very few people, only about 12%, are totally against it. And here's the part that really surprised the experts. Support for SRM is actually highest in the countries of the global south, the very places that are most vulnerable to climate change. You know what people are scared of also really depends on where they live. In richer countries in the global north, the biggest fears are about unexpected side effects on the environment. But in developing nations, people are more worried about the geopolitics of it all, that it could impose unfair risks on them, or, and this is a big one, that it could be used as an excuse for rich countries to just stop trying to cut their CO2 emissions. And that concern about geopolitics, believe me, This isn't some minor detail. This might just be the biggest, most complicated piece of the entire puzzle. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, humanity decides to go for it. Who could actually pull this off? Who has the tech, the money, the power to run a program that literally changes the sky for the entire planet? Okay, so if we're just talking pure technology, the who can build it part, you're looking at a list of about 10 countries. These are the nations with the kind of advanced aerospace industry needed to build a fleet of hundreds of these special high-flying planes. But here's the thing. In the real world, just being able to build the planes is not enough, not even close. You would also need the kind of raw power, economic, military, diplomatic, to just push forward even when the rest of the world is screaming at you to stop. So when you add that filter, that list of 10 countries, it shrinks fast. And analysts pretty much all agree you're left with just 2 nations powerful enough to actually implement a plan this huge against serious opposition: the United States and China. So what this all means is that the future of this entire technology probably comes down to the relationship between these 2 superpowers. If they both agree to do it, it's likely going to happen. If they both agree to block it, it's probably dead in the water. But what if they disagree? Well, that is the absolute nightmare scenario. It could throw a whole new, terrifying layer on top of global tensions. And this all leads to a couple of massive fears. The first one is what they call moral hazard. It's the worry that if we have this technology as a backup plan, we'll just get lazy about doing the hard work of cutting emissions. But the other fear is even scarier. It's called termination shock. Imagine we get this sunshade up and running, and then something forces us to suddenly stop. A war, an economic collapse, whatever. All that warming that was being hidden, it would come roaring back with a terrifying speed, way faster than we could ever adapt. We could literally get locked in. So what's the takeaway here? It's that we are staring at an incredible, almost impossible dilemma. Is solar geoengineering a reckless gamble with our planet's health and our global stability? Or is it a last-ditch emergency tool that we might be forced to use? And maybe the biggest question of all is, in a world where some countries are so much more powerful than others, who gets to make that choice for all of us?